Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. This is Alice Li Hagan. My guest today is Dr. Dina Yoshimi. She is the Director of Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative, an initiative with the College of Languages, Linguistics, and Literature at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She's also an Associate Professor of Japanese there. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you very much.
First of all, tell us about this upcoming symposium on building a multilingual workforce for Hawaii. That's happening on Monday at the state capitol.
Yes, indeed. The symposium is our starting point for the second year of the Roadmap Initiative. In fact, the Roadmap has been in effect since September of 2013, and we have been working on outreach and awareness raising. We've talked to hundreds of employers and job seekers. We've worked with many of the state agencies, and at this point we are ready to build our next steps to begin to take action in the state. The symposium will include about 50 people from business, education, community organizations, and also from the state government agencies as well as the judiciary. And we will be working on mapping out legislative initiatives, education initiatives, and also the coordination and funding for the upcoming year of the Roadmap Initiative.
Producer, would you mind showing us the image? Just the image, please. So, for anyone who may be interested in learning more about this symposium, you can always contact Dina, and her contact information is on this image here, and we will show the contact information again towards the end of the program. Thank you, producer. Now, you started off with telling us that this initiative has to do with employers, job seekers, and the state. Let's talk a little bit about job seekers. And I guess my question for you is, how does this symposium tie into developing a multilingual workforce? And before you give us the answer, let's take a look at a footage, actually a news story from KITV maybe about a year ago.
Yes.
Producer, could you roll that footage for us, please?
Dozens of different languages are spoken in our islands, but that's led to a growing problem as more foreign speakers can't communicate in English. And there aren't enough interpreters available.
The need is growing, especially because of the language access law that passed in 2006 that requires state agencies that receive state funding to it requires them to provide language access to their services.
The state has needed more court interpreters for quite some time, while those fluent in foreign languages are also increasingly wanted in other critical areas like hospitals, mental health services, and with police.
Interpreters must have more than just a basic understanding of a language. They have to translate important details like a legal matter, medical condition, or medication.
It can be life and death situation if you have a poor interpreter.
Tomoyoki Miura was born in Japan and converses in Japanese when at home. Growing up in Hawaii, he would read, write, and communicate in English at school. Now he hopes to put his two learned languages to use.
If I can make a living or some kind of earning from this, that would be great as an interpreter, either here in Hawaii or maybe perhaps back in Japan.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful to have been invited to deliver this Singapore lecture.
お集まりの皆様、本日はシンガポールレクチャーにお招きいただき誠にありがとうございます。
Miura was just one of dozens of students taking part in the University of Hawaii's intensive 6-week summer course designed to sharpen up communication skills, giving them the ability to translate in the most demanding settings, like when world leaders come to town. But Miura simply hopes his bilingual training will help him get a job.
I'm actually in computer science, so if I could find some kind of interpreting opportunity related to technology, computer IT settings, that would be ideal. Yeah, I would.
I'm really proud of the different languages we have here, and at the end, Hawaii is really a microcosm of all the different languages. So give us some comments about what we just saw.
Sure. One of the things that we know is that students are looking for skills that will advance their ability to get a good job, a good paying job in the workplace. And we know that language skills have become increasingly valued in this global economy. And as the video clip shows, one of the spaces where language skills are going to be very useful is in interpreting and translating. It turns out that there's actually a whole industry of localization which requires people who have language skills to bring the message of a product into another culture, maintaining the quality and the feel of the original message. And those kinds of skills are the kinds of skills that you develop when you're studying a language, studying its literature, studying its culture and its history. And so we can see that language skills, just proficiency alone, is part of the package, but a full understanding of the language and its background can actually enhance your capacity to get a job. In addition, we have within the state, as you mentioned, it's a microcosm of really a greater part of the world. There are any number of jobs in this state where a language skill will help you in completing the tasks of the job more efficiently and certainly with more customer satisfaction. And that includes positions within the state as well as within the private industry.
Well, so how do you think, since we have so many different languages here, so how are we faring in terms of utilizing all these people who have these different language skills?
The unfortunate part about the language skills in Hawaii is that they're predominantly recognized as home skills. Good for talking with grandma or with auntie or with the relatives back in Japan or Philippines, if you will. Most people don't see these language skills as valuable for the workforce. And in fact, home language is not valuable for the workforce. But if you take your home language skills, which includes a very basic proficiency and usually a very high level of proficiency, and you take a few classes where you can develop a capacity to speak maturely, professionally, and possibly with a certain level of capacity within your own technical or area of specialization, then what you have is somebody who's work ready.
Do you feel that this is across the board in public, private, nonprofit sectors, or are there certain sectors who are doing better in terms of recognizing that language skills are important?
What I have found is that there are a few organizations on the island and in the islands as well that have recognized the language skills that a person brings to the workforce can be developed within on-the-job training. One of the classic examples of this is at Kokua Kalihi Valley, which is a clinic in Kalihi Valley. And what they have done is they bring people who are native speakers of the language onto their staff and then train them there to be caseworkers, to understand the medical terminology, and to be able to facilitate communication with patients in a way that an interpreter cannot. There's that interface between people who share a culture and share a language, and now the person who's working at KKV, as they refer to it, can actually be facilitative at a proficiency of a professional level as well. What we see a lot of times in some of the smaller communities across the state is that people will have a proficiency and they'll be tabbed. You know, could you please come and help us here for a moment? So for example, on Kauai, there are speakers of many languages. And when, for example, somebody shows up in the emergency room and they cannot communicate, that person will get a phone call and they'll come and they'll help. And that is truly the aloha spirit for the islands. Ideally, though, that person would be recognized for their skills, be hired on staff, or at least be compensated in a way that would be respectful for the skills that they bring to the task.
So you're saying they are not really, it's really more an ad hoc response to whatever the situation presents itself then?
In communities that have small populations, so low incidence of the need for another language skill, it seems that the aloha spirit and the make-do spirit are what prevail. Certainly there are parts of the Big Island as well where smaller populations are working in the same way. And it's important to recognize that this is happening within the state and perhaps build a more effective infrastructure so that we don't have to rely on these few kind-hearted individuals.
Yeah. Since you started talking about the healthcare industry, I wonder if you can make comments about perhaps other industries that are doing things to recognize employees' language proficiencies, and that could be perhaps shared by other industries or different sectors.
Yes. One of the things that we see is an effort to give a broad awareness. So, for example, Outrigger is one of the companies that is recognizing the value of language skills in its workforce. We also see the Hawaii Tourism Authority recognizing the importance of language skills within its workforce. And what they have are broad participation on a focused area. So, for example, as we saw recently in the newspaper, how do you interact appropriately with Japanese clientele, Japanese-speaking clientele? These organizations may not be able to send their staff off to get full-on language training, but they're taking the first step to value the language skills that they know employees either have or can develop. Ideally, though, we would be seeing something like this in public education, so that employers would be able to work from a base rather than being the base, with the employer having to provide the fundamentals. If we could actually have within our public education some kind of a starting space, possibly through the CTE program.
CTE
Oh, sorry, is career technical education, where students who are working and thinking about job skills can think about language as an additional skill, and in so doing, develop just enough so that as they move into the workforce, they have the fundamentals and they can build on them.
Now, you brought up public education. It has to start with the foundation. So how are we doing right now in terms of training our future leaders and business people with the language?
There is a tremendous challenge facing the DOE at this time with respect to assessment and bringing on the Common Core and integrating all of these different changes that have been tasked to them. The capacity to maintain a quality world language program at the same time is maybe a little more than we can ask of the DOE at this time. In addition, the need for highly skilled teachers is going to be a problem as we move forward, because there are not teachers in training at this point who will become the highly skilled teachers of world languages for the next generation.
How do you get more teachers interested in?
I believe the biggest need is to ensure that there is a demand in the classroom. As students are interested, then teachers will know that there are positions for them. I think right now, because language has taken a back seat to some of the science and technical areas, and students are focused really on a career without considering that a career might include language, language has taken a back seat. And so enrollment in language classes is not as robust as it might be, which makes it difficult for schools to ask for positions.
But it's surprising when we hear so many different languages here. And earlier on, before the show, we were talking about how do we compare then with other states, other cities in the, on the U.S. mainland?
It's interesting to note that although Hawaii has such a large multilingual population, it's programs on the mainland that have really taken the lead in training language skills for students. The state of Utah, which also has a language roadmap, is recognized as the leader in this endeavor. They have 4 languages where they engage in dual immersion from kindergarten, which means that the child learns math and science material in a second language, meaning a language other than English, and social studies and language arts in English, which may or may not be their first language. So you can have, for example, a child who's a Spanish speaker in the Spanish dual immersion program, where their strength is Spanish, so their strength might be math and science, and they're picking up and improving their English as they go through their participation in the program.
Dina, let's take a short break. I'd like to come back to talk to you a little bit more about this dual immersion program because I guess I went through something similar, but let's take a short break.
Very good.
My guest here is Dr. Dina Yoshimi. She is the director of Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative, and we've been talking about the significance of building a multilingual workforce here in Hawaii. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii Biz Ed Spotlight. My name is Alice Li Hagan. With me today is Dr. Dina Yoshimi. She is the director of Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. They are having their symposium on building a multilingual workforce in Hawaii at the state capitol on Monday, August 18th. Dina, before the break, we were talking about the state of Utah having these immersion programs.
Yes.
Tell us about that. And I went through that. I didn't like it, but that now in retrospect, I'm glad I went through the dual immersion program. It's not only the language, but it's also the thought process.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what's your thought about that?
One of the things that concern parents is that if you have two languages, the child will get confused and won't learn the material properly. And what they have found is that just as with other language skills, everything straightens out by the third grade. So you may see significant differences in children's ability to follow what's going on or to perform. But by the time third grade comes around, you'll see that the children are proficient both in speaking and literacy skills in both languages. And from that point on, that's when you start word problems in math. That's when you start with more significant reading. And what they see is that the children in the dual immersion programs outperform children in single language programs consistently. And interestingly, it's not just children who are, what you might call the average student, also students who have learning challenges, students who are coming from homes that have a language other than English as the home language, they are also outperforming. And this includes even special ed kids in, for example, the Chinese dual immersion program, outperforming their peers in single language programs. So it's clear that the second language makes an enormous difference in terms of cognitive development. And the goal for Utah's program is to have the graduates of their program finishing high school at basically a level where they've completed the degree requirements for a major in college, a language major. So they are actually finishing a major before they even complete high school, and then they can take those language skills and build a specialization onto it in college.
Wow, the cognitive ability aside, I just think that with at least two different languages, it will open up so many doors for students.
Yes.
You also mentioned that Utah has been very progressive in terms of their education system in promoting, multilingualism. Let's go back to how this whole language roadmap initiative started, because I think Utah is one state.
One of six,
okay.
yes.
So yeah, could you tell us about the history behind this?
Certainly. What we know is that within the government, there's a program called the National Security Education Program. And for many years, their goal was to ensure that we had very highly skilled, professional level speakers of languages that were of strategic interest to the United States. That program began to spread across the U.S. into language flagships. And UH actually has two language flagships. We have the only Korean language flagship in the nation, and we have just added a Chinese language flagship. So those programs are specifically to bring students up to a professional level.
So how do they decide which state to give these flagship programs?
So the flagship programs are competitive. It's a grant application, and you need to demonstrate that you have the faculty, that you have the expertise, that you have the population to sustain the program. And then each year you have to demonstrate that you actually are performing, because it's only going to be supported if you're actually producing graduates who can speak these languages. What the government recognized, though, what the federal government recognized is, and of course Senator Akaka has been critical in helping people to recognize this, is that a country of a few highly capable speakers and everybody else monolingual is not going to be a very favorable place for the 21st century reality that we're going to enter. And so what they did was look for ways to bring language more into focus across the state for everybody. And that's where the roadmap program actually fits in. The idea is that a state is given a certain amount of funding to bring together stakeholders in a language summit. So we have business, we have basically the supply side and the demand side. So we have educators, and then we have business and community organizations and state agencies. And together they sit down and say, what are your needs? How can we meet them? And work out a roadmap, literally a plan of action for how to bring language more effectively into the state's workforce and its education system.
So now you said that this whole initiative started September in 2013. So it's almost a year since you launched the initiative. What have you accomplished to this date?
One of the critical things that preceded the launch was stakeholder buy-in. So we had many conversations with employers. We began just by cold calling employers and talking with people and finding out what kinds of needs they had and whether there was even awareness of what their language needs might be. It became obvious quite quickly that there was a tremendous awareness, particularly among community organizations, of how important language is to the people of the state. And what we saw again and again on the neighbor islands and across Oahu is that there are many small organizations that are doing huge work to make sure that good things happen. In other words, that people get the human services they need and get the assistance they need. In preparing for the launch then, we brought those people together into working groups. Those working groups proposed projects. And so what we've done in the first year is raise awareness of the work that preceded the launch, sharing best practices with other organizations, as I mentioned, reaching out to employers and job seekers to let them know language is a valued resource for them, to let them know that we're working on developing more access to language skills for students. And so specifically in this first year, I would say that we have created a cohort of people who understand the need and who are ready to move forward to do something about it.
So do you get equal support from the public and the private sectors and the educators then?
I would say that there are people who are passionate about this issue in each of those areas, often in places where you would never expect to find such passion.
Oh, like what?
Well, working with the DLIR, I was actually invited to give a small presentation to the DLIR.
So Department of Labor and Industrial Relations.
Yes.
Okay.
And there, by chance, was a representative from the Big Island, Mark Nakashima, who was very interested in this idea that language skills could be a valuable part of workforce skills. I had no idea there would be a representative who was so taken, and thanks to the representative, we were able to begin the work of developing legislative efforts, which we initiated last year and we hope to continue this year. At that same meeting, there was somebody who recognized that there's a database in the state called Career Kukua. And the Career Kukua database is all about occupations. And that database is used by high schools, high school guidance counselors, community college counselors, the career center counselors at all the UH campuses, the one-stop centers. So thousands of people access that database. And it was brought to my attention. And when I looked at it, I found that there was nothing about language skills.
Wow.
Basically, there were three jobs: language teacher, interpreter, translator, and tour bus driver. Those were the only jobs perceived to need language skills.
That's fascinating. So that database must be quite outdated, because even with my job, I'm grateful that I speak Chinese, because
Yes.
that has been really helpful in working with a lot of the organizations and clients from China. So there are only
Exactly.
3 jobs in the database. So what do you propose to do then?
So what we have been invited to do, thanks to the coordinator for the database, is to prepare, based on our research, additional lines of text to be inserted into the job occupation descriptions and qualifications that specifically identify which languages and which skills would be needed for each job. And we've completed a data spreadsheet of about 50 occupations, and we will continue to do this with the rest of the database until we complete the task.
Wow, that would be a huge undertaking.
It's a very large undertaking. I am grateful that the Dean of the College of Languages, Linguistics, and Literature, Dean Blyve-Roman, has supported this endeavor with a graduate assistant who is tremendously energetic.
Oh, that's great.
And we're hoping also to bring other undergraduates on board to continue the research effort, because it will also help them understand what kinds of jobs and language skills are out there, and help them, we hope, with their job search.
Now, you mentioned about the language roadmap that involves stakeholder buy-in from the public sector, from the government, from private businesses, from community. So community and the government sector you've talked about, and what about the private sector? And when I think about private sector, you mentioned tourism industry, but besides them, who else would benefit from a multilingual workforce?
One of the places that we've identified as really critical need is medical and healthcare. We know that services need to be provided equally by law, but also of necessity to ensure that everybody has equal access to healthcare. One of the areas where language skills become extremely important is in elder care. We see that many of the populations that have been in Hawaii for many years have limited English proficiency. They have been agricultural workers, or they have worked within their own communities, and as they age, they may not maintain their English language skills. I know it's not uncommon that somebody who's spoken a second language their whole life reverts back to their native language as they get older. And we also see sometimes that people have just never actually developed beyond a kind of marketplace level of English. So when you're trying to explain to them a cancer treatment, they don't have the language skills available. So having healthcare workers and social workers who can facilitate communication in those areas is really critical.
So how are we faring in that area right now?
It's a challenge. The hospitals in particular are working with phone-based interpreting at this time for the high-stakes kinds of decisions that need to be made. So if you have to give somebody a life and death decision, frequently you'll be understanding that through a phone interpreter, which means a third party is participating in something that is, it's of course a neutral third party, but nonetheless a third party is facilitating that exchange.
Why can't it be a face-to-face meeting and interpretation?
On some, in some some spaces that opportunity is available, but either by virtue of the language or by virtue of the availability of the person, you know, somebody who speaks the language, maybe they're booked and they simply can't do it in the time that the consultation needs to happen. There is a national service. It's a private service, and I think there are actually more than one. But hospitals across the country have been using this. I don't know of any studies that have looked at whether this has an impact on the quality of care, but I have spoken to doctors who indicate that these consultations can take twice as long, and that the physician frequently feels that they haven't really communicated with the patient. So as much as we highly value the skills of interpreters, it's so valuable to have a chance to make that face-to-face, even if you can only do it for part of the interaction, to connect with the patient. How do you feel? Has anything changed? to be able to at least understand from the patient's perspective directly what they are experiencing.
So when you talk about this scenario in healthcare, is it here in Hawaii or is it across the nation? Are there certain cities, states that are doing better than the others?
As far as I know, every state is trying to build a core of interpreters to fulfill these language access requirements, because it's also federal law. But I also understand that there is a very limited supply of highly certified interpreters. The certification is a national certification. It requires a lot of study and extremely high fluency. We have, I believe, 1 or 2 people who are certified to be medical interpreters in the state. So we're working, of course, to improve that, and the Office of Language Access recognizes how important that is, but it takes time.
There's certainly a lot of work to be done, not only in healthcare, but I'm sure in many other industries. Yes. Why don't we take another break? And when we come back, I'd like to ask for your comment about how we compare as a state to other states who are also having this initiative. And perhaps internationally speaking, where do we stand? So, my guest here is Dr. Dina Yoshimi. She is the director of the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard, and I host the show Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series right here every Wednesday from 2 to 3 Hawaii time. I would really love to have you watch the show and see what we do here. I talk with some of the most amazing people, artists, most of them, all of them involved in some sort of artistic process. And our goal here on the show is to dig into that artistic process, and you would not believe what some people say, what some people do, what people go through to express. And these are people who have to express somehow, and I find that infinitely interesting. Not only that they have to express, but how they end up doing it. I really hope that you will watch the show and enjoy talking with some of these people the same way that I do. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon on Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series, Wednesdays from 2 to 3. See you soon.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii BizEd Spotlight. This is Alice Li Hagan. With me today is Dr. Dina Yoshimi. She is the director of the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. She is talking to us about the opportunities and challenges of building a multilingual workforce here in Hawaii. Now, before the break, you talked about the healthcare sector, which is trying to build up a core, I guess, multilingual employees who could work with clients with different language groups. Yes. Now, going back to the language roadmap initiative, there are, together with us, there are 6 states altogether, yes. Right? How are we doing compared to these other states? And the other states are Utah.
So let me go in order. The first year was Oregon, Ohio, and Texas, and that was followed by Utah, and then Rhode Island.
Okay.
And we are the 6th state. How are we doing? The first 3 states were successful in creating roadmaps, but I believe they had some trouble following through, recognizing that it was the first, and so they understood how to form a plan, but the idea of following through on that plan became something of a challenge. As a result, I think Utah learned from that and was able to appoint somebody within the government, within the state government, to implement their roadmap, particularly within the education sector. Rhode Island also has somebody who is in charge, who has pushed the initiative forward. They are looking at a certificate of bilingualism, so what they call a biliteracy seal.
Okay.
And that would be worked on within their DOE and trying to get buy-in from state legislators who would then pass legislation to create such a seal. That seal is something that California has without a roadmap. They've created the seal. They were actually where that original idea came from. And the idea is to allow graduates from high school who have proficiency in 2 languages to be recognized for that proficiency with a seal. Hawaii is fortunate that we have learned from the others and recognized that having very concrete, very specific goals and having a coordination with business and education and leadership within state agencies is going to be critical to moving things forward. We recently had a visit from officials from Washington, D.C., who have been part of the funding for this initiative, and they were very excited about what we have accomplished in the first year and our directions for the second year. Thank you. We were thrilled that they were thrilled. And what was exciting was to hear them say that this is what they had hoped would happen with the roadmap, that there would be wide buy-in, that there would be a recognition that this is across sectors. It's not just business, not just education. And one of the values of being in Hawaii, one of the assets I would say, is that we are small enough to know each other, to bump into each other, to know a friend of a friend who knows the person you're working with, so the word spreads. And I think in addition to that, the idea that we do have this compassion for each other, this recognition that we have to share in moving the world forward, I would say the combination of our size and our good hearts has enabled us to make the progress that we've made.
I think it's sometimes an advantage that we live on an island, because I was talking to somebody else about aging. That's a different story, but they also said that we have a small enough population that we can do a lot to experiment, telehealth and all that, but that's an aside. So the symposium, is this something that the other states haven't done? Is this...
This would be the first.
Oh,
yes.
that's great.
It shows that we have created a community of people who believe that this endeavor is important.
Okay.
We want to continue to reach out to mayors on other islands, to other legislators, to other members of the business and community organizations, to help them understand the value of language so that we're moving forward on this together. It's really a big conversation.
That's a really big accomplishment too. But talking about accomplishments, so what would your objectives be for this symposium? What would you like to get out of this at the end? Yeah, of I guess 9:30 on Monday morning.
Yes, the goal with the symposium is to put concrete steps in place so that each person knows, let's say, which piece of the puzzle they're working on. Having a shared understanding, having a shared awareness of where we need to go is really an important first step when you're building an initiative. But very quickly people will say, yeah, I've heard that before. What can I do? And actually many people have asked me, what can I do?
Let's go to the business side then. What can they do from the business perspective?
I think the best space for business at this point is really twofold. One is to take inventory of who do they already have working for them, who might be able to use the language skills if they were given a signal that those language skills are valued. And perhaps if a business were to look and say, you know, actually we have speakers of 3 or 4 different languages, but they're all home language speakers. What can we do for professional development for these employees so that they can bring this workplace, this home language into the workplace and make it an asset for our business? Ironically, I was just at a printer's 2 days ago printing business cards, and the person who was working with me is a Korean speaker. She's a home Korean speaker. And yet, she said, her mom told her, you can't speak this Korean outside of the house, it's not acceptable. She then went to take some classes at a community college. She upped the level of her Korean and was very glad to be able to get a job where she is in a Korean-speaking cohort. She is able to use it with Korean-speaking clientele and has no concerns about her capacity to use her language in the workplace.
It's great that she took the initiative to take some courses and utilize her language skills. But then you just mentioned it, that there's a difference between home language and a professional language. And to get business to buy into recognizing people with multilingual skills, that seems to be a big change. What do you think would be the challenges for them?
I think the most important challenge for a business is to see the big picture, to say there's going to be a return on investment if I give this person time off to take classes, or if I support them in taking some additional classes, will they bring home the bacon, so to speak? Will it change the way my business functions in terms of clientele or customer satisfaction? For sure, we know from the airlines experience that that is the case, that customer complaints when they're on a flight, customer complaints, what we've heard about for our tourism industry, small, simple things could include, although I'm sure they haven't been cataloged, using the wrong formula for saying I'm sorry. I once watched a waiter spill a drink on somebody at a very high-scale restaurant in Waikiki and proceeded to say sumimasen, as if he was trying to make his way onto a train, rather than using a proper honorific expression of apology to the guest for having created this disaster. And I was cringing because I was thinking to myself, this is not the right language. Why didn't they train this person? So understanding what the criteria are for proper language use is the second half. Taking inventory, knowing who you have, and then developing some way to recognize that there is proper language skill capacity. It doesn't have to be super high proficiency, but it has to be appropriate to the space.
Right, especially going back to that story of yours, customer service oriented industries, they really have to pay attention to that. Now, we are not the only country with multilingual speakers. So I guess my last question for you then is, how do we compare to, say, Australia, Canada, or Britain?
It's a good question. What I have read, as I have not been to Britain, is that they are deeply concerned about the monolingual state of their population. They recognize that their English monolinguals greatly outnumber anybody else, and that puts them in a position very much the way we saw ourselves before we began so many dual immersion and flagship initiatives, as we don't have people who can act on behalf of the country using a second language. I don't know if Canada has actually taken up this matter. I do know that because they have, the Francophone and Anglophone populations, there's been more, I don't want to call it a civil war, but let's just say an internal need to respect each other.
Yeah, and I lived in Canada for 18 years. It's more politics rather than really recognizing the benefit of the languages, but there certainly are benefits.
Yes. So I just recently was in Alberta, and I saw much more French than I remember seeing 20 or 30 years ago when I was there last time as a tourist.
Okay.
So I was thinking, well, at least they're pushing French. And if you start with one second language, then frequently a third one will come. But I don't think they necessarily have taken up this call. Australia, of all those three, is the one that I think has been most proactive, predominantly because they recognize that they are a Pacific nation and that they need to be able to communicate with their neighbors, and their neighbors are not English speakers. So there is a tremendous push in Australia for learning of Japanese and Chinese and other languages. The extent to which their population has taken up this position, I think, is something that has not been documented. But I know within the educational institutions, there is a push for this, including before secondary education.
So where are we among these nations then?
I would say we're doing pretty well in having recognized the concern and gotten started. And the fact that dual immersion has become popular not just in Utah, but now across the country. There are any number of states where you can find dual immersion programs now in many languages, and many immigrant populations are saying, we want that for our group too. So the idea that we can be a multilingual nation, not necessarily a nation that has two official languages, but rather a nation that respects diversity, believe that that is something that we can look forward to in the future.
And I think going back to our earlier discussion about how very often we comment about, oh, immigrants, kids especially, struggling with English, but you have a different way of putting it.
Yes, yes. This is something actually that came from a document produced in Rhode Island, where they talk about the proficient bilingual rather than the deficient English speaker. And I think that is an attitude that we really want to see across the country, is a recognition that a second language brings benefit, brings richness, brings engagement, brings enhanced communication, and the English language skills will come as the person feels that they, as a whole person, are welcome within society.
And I think we are in a good place to further develop this initiative and to value all these people who speak different languages here. Well, good luck with the symposium on Monday. Producer, if you don't mind showing the image one more time. I've been talking to Dr. Dina Yoshimi, the director of the Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative. The upcoming symposium on building multilingual workforce for Hawaii is going to be at the state capitol on Monday, August 18th. And for further information, I believe Dr. Yoshimi's contact information is on the image there. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. My name is Alice Li Hagan. You have been watching ThinkTech Hawaii BizEd Spotlight. Please tune into my next week's show, and I'll be interviewing a senior general manager with Ticketmaster. Stay tuned.